Holy buckets. The number of active listings, the supply of active listings in the Portland metro area increased by 3.2% in just 1 week. I'm Ron Milligan with RE/MAX Select here in Portland's Pearl District, and I'm here to try to make some sense of these numbers. As usual, this is our weekly update for the Portland metro area. That includes Southwest Washington and Portland and all the surrounding bedroom communities. So let's get into the numbers. First up is the supply of active listings. As I said, 540 is an increase about 3.2%. That's 170 more listings than the previous week. You can see here 5496 versus last week 5325. That was a bit of a surprise because, as you can see here, we kind of hit a high point about 4 weeks ago, 5528, and going back, even about 5-6 weeks ago, things sort of leveled off. Prior to that, we've been seeing big increases week after week after week, and then, when we hit 5503, looks like about 7 weeks ago, things started to level off. They started to dip a little bit, and they went up a little bit, so on and so forth. Previous week, we'd seen kind of a significant decrease in the number of active listings, and then boom, they went up again. Again, not as high as we were at our high point for the year, which was at 5523 number or 5528 number. I did one thing where I went back to my notes from last year and checked to see what happened last year at this time, and it was kind of the same dynamic. After Labor Day, the number of active listings last year jumped up by 175, and that was kind of a big increase. So this could be just a little bit of a dynamic of what happens after Labor Day, after people are returning from holidays over the summer. Like I keep saying, we always have a nice bump of business in September that we close in October, and that's both new listings and buyer activity. So let's talk about buyer demand. Buyer demand was down, and that was a bit of a surprise for me. Last week, I was saying, gosh, our numbers were over that weekend, that holiday weekend, where it was kind of the last hurrah of summer. Agents weren't working, and I was expecting to see a bit of a bounce back this week. So the number of new pendings went from 625 down to 558. That was a little bit of a surprise, and that's where the numbers, the dynamic between last year and this year vary a bit. Last year, the numbers were also down versus the previous week, but not by this margin. So that's one number that we're going to watch, and we're going to see if that doesn't bounce back, see if that was a bit of a blip. Like I've said, one number doesn't create a trend, but this, what happened this week sort of spoiled the trend that we were seeing take shape. So we'll keep an eye on this and let you know how it fares next week. And if it turns into a trend, or if it was just another blip, or if we need to wait 2 or 3 more weeks until something starts to take shape and we can start to make sense of it. The number of price reductions was high. The previous week was 581. This last week we saw 823 price reductions. That could be the result of folks thinking about, gosh, that holiday weekend the previous week, we know it's going to be sleepy. We don't want to do our price reduction. We want to do our price reduction when buyers are going to be around to see it. So that could be the explanation for why that number was considerably higher than the previous week, which was a lower number than we've been seeing prior to that. Of the homes that did price reductions, 456 of them did price reductions of $15,000 or more. The previous week, that number was just over 300, so that was a bigger number. The days on market, well, actually, let's talk about the number of homes that sold. It was a suppressed number, 512 homes sold versus the previous week, 646. Last year, that number was also kind of a suppressed number. Not a surprise there. Last year, that was 625. Not a surprise there because we did have a holiday. Monday was a holiday. Title companies and the county were closed, so deals couldn't be recorded that day. That number should bounce back next week, but we'll see. I'm not making any predictions after what happened last week. On average, the homes that did sell, they spent 23 days on the market. That was down a couple days versus the previous week. Last year at this time, it was 20 days on market. A median was 16. Last year at this time, it was only 6. The average sale price came in at $613,194 versus last year, which was $575, $569. That was a decrease both last year and this year, but the margin for this year was larger than it was last year, so that changed the difference. Last week we sold the average sale price was 7.9% higher than it was pretty much the same week last year. This week we came in at 6.5%, so that number's decreasing. Median sale price came in at $550 versus last year $514. That's a 7% increase in the median sale price. Previous week that number was 9.5%. On average, homes sold at 96.74% of the asking price, of the original asking price. So that number has just been inching down week after week after week. We can see that the average sale price is starting to stagnate, and it does do that this time of year typically. On average, on a typical year, the highest average sale price is usually some month in April, or some week in April and May. And then it starts to decrease throughout the balance of the year. So not a big surprise there that this number is going down, but it is going down faster, it feels like, than it did last year. The number of canceled and expired listings, that's staying pretty steady. Previous week it was 84 and 145. This week it was 170 and 35. So the number of expireds did go down. That number last week was a bit of a blip. It was a higher number than we've been seeing typically, and it could just be that folks are like, hey, if it doesn't sell by the end of summer, I'm just going to take it off the market and rent it out, which I suspect a lot of people are doing. By the way, the numbers for the rent increases did come in because we have statewide rent control in Portland, or in Oregon. That number came in at, I think it was just over 14% that you can increase rents. I don't think anyone's going that high, even as tight as the rental market is, but you can go as high as 14% because that number is tied to the rate of inflation, the CPI. Last thing up are short sales and bank-owned properties. Last week that number was 26 bank-owns and 7 short sales. This week it's 24 bank-owns and 7 short sales. And of those, only 3 of the bank owns are under contract right now. So still a really, really small percentage. We're not seeing that number go up, and it's a really small percentage compared to the almost 5,500 active listings we have in the metro area. So anyway, that's what we've got for you this week. As always, I'd love a thumbs up, and I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel or share the video with someone that you think might find it interesting. And I'll see you next week.